You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendall and Carl Dummler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos Country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dummler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendall. Nick, I know you got to get away this last weekend and go have some fun with some of your friends, and how was it, man?
Hey, it was a lot of fun. We were up in the Wisconsin Dells area. We did a combined bachelorette party. We had like 16 people up there, so it was a good time. A lot of adult beverages were consumed, and we got lucky with the weather. Got a little bit sunburnt, but what can you do? That happens. I applied, but I'm white. It's just going to happen sometimes. Especially, I think when you're drinking alcohol to it, like if it makes you more likely to get sunburned. I think that's a thing. I should know that.
Okay.
I'm a scientist, so maybe you just get drunk and forget to reapply. But
right.
I'm a little burnt on the shoulders and my neck and chest. So, oh well, aloe vera. But back to the grind now. No breaks now for a little bit, and football is right around the corner. So excited to get to that. Football is right around the corner. Yeah, 1 week.
Boom.
Yeah.
Finally, it's always a long off season. This hasn't felt as bad as some of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's like last year's was really, really long. I don't know why it seemed like it lasted forever, but yeah. So this one hasn't been as bad, at least for me. Maybe other Bronco fans feel different. But anyway, it's always exciting when football starts back up. Training camp gets everybody excited. I can't wait to see and hear what's going on out there. And so make sure that you're following us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dummler MHH, and of course Nick at Nick Kendall MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles on all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. If you enjoy our show, make sure you head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. We're Building the Broncos, along with Huddle Up, are found under the Huddle Up podcast. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. So, as we are drawing closer to the start of training camp, like we said, it's just one of those times to kind of start looking at what our team's going to be. Maybe we can start figuring out at least a few things, and because there are some clarity issues when you're looking at the offense and what's going to happen on with Scangarello and Munchak and all those kind of guys in the building, and got some young talent that hopefully will pan out there. But it's really the defensive side. I think we have at least a decent idea, not only of the players, but also the scheme that the Broncos are going to be running. And so Nick and I thought it'd be a good idea just to kind of give you an idea. We've watched a ton of Bears work. I was going to say, when you're watching the Bears, have you watched much of their offense?
Honestly, I can't say that I've watched a lot of Bears offense. I'll check in for James Daniels, because go Hawks. But other than that, I mean, yeah, they have some fun players on the in the skill position, but not too much of the offense. It's more the defense, which has been the case there for forever. I can't imagine. I can't even think of the last time the Bears had a dynamic, super elite offense, but they tend to really just cycle in and out of great defenses.
Right. No, I was just earlier this week watching some of the Bears. I happened to catch some of the offense as well, and just watching how they used Mitch Trubisky made me think a lot of how I wouldn't mind the Broncos using Drew Lock whenever he possibly becomes the starter. Just because Mitch Trubisky's got some athleticism, Drew Lock's got some athleticism, both have him a decent arm. I don't know, just a lot of the ways that they used him, I'm just going, I hope the Broncos watch at least a little bit of that and say we need to get some of that into our system as well. But that's for another day.
It's that Andy Reid disciple West Coast style offense.
It is.
So we're that Shanahan one now, which, we'll see. That's obviously been pretty darn good there with some unique weapons. But, I mean, looking at the success of those offenses under the disciples of Andy Reid has been pretty darn special. I mean, You obviously got Peterson with the Eagles doing stuff with Wentz, again, another quarterback with some athleticism. And then you got Nagy now. So it's going to be interesting. And then would you consider Reich also from that tree?
Yeah, I think
or
so.
Is that too far down? Because Reich was underneath Peterson at the Eagles.
Well, I mean, it's just
Trickle down.
It's a grandchild.
Yeah,
I guess you could say. That's how I would put it. But I don't know. It's interesting to see how his system has really taken off in the NFL, and it just fits what works in the NFL today. I mean, he's not the only one out there having success, obviously. As the Patriots with Brady and what they do, obviously having success. Shanahan and his crew, they seem to have been having a lot of success everywhere they go. So, yeah, I mean, it's just for the most part, when you're seeing a lot of the quarterbacks coming out, they seem to fit that Andy Reid system pretty well. I think it's simplified. I think you're taking a lot of the pressure off the quarterback with some of the reads, which, again, just thinking young quarterback, trying to make things as easy as possible. I think what I watched with them just made me think Drew Lock could really do well with this.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and we'll see if we see him this year. Obviously, it will depend on health and the play of the Broncos and Joe Flacco and everything, but if they do get it to him, I'd love an offense system like that. So I'm excited for the offense, and obviously a young offensive nucleus developing with them and a new scheme. It's going to take a little bit of a learning curve. I mean, hell, look at how long it took for the Broncos to take off with a guy who's as smart as anyone in Peyton Manning. You know, new system, new guys around him. It's going to take a little bit of time for the offense to get going, just because much more complicated than defense. But
right,
I'm excited for it, and it's just something that I'm not expecting great things from this year, but I'm hoping for flashes of excitement and improvement over time.
Right, progression.
Yes, exactly.
That's what you want to see, more success than what you saw last year. And with new people in the building, like you said, there's going to be times where it's going to have some struggle. I think some people forget when Peyton came into the building, like you said, they didn't click right away.
Took 6 weeks.
Yeah, they started out 2-3.
Yep, not great.
And it wasn't, and then, I mean, it was looking like they were going to be 2-4. Then that was that San Diego huge comeback game that really just kind of sparked the rest of the season.
Yep.
But that's, again, with Peyton Manning at the helm. So we don't really have Peyton Manning in the building right now.
Yep. So
we do have,
got to temper him a little bit there.
Right. But what we do have is Vic Fangio. And he has been known as one of the best defensive minds in all of football. Seems like everywhere this man goes, good things follow for the defense. Now, he is the head coach, so I do wonder a little bit, is it going to be him calling plays or Ed Donatel? How would that change if Ed Donatel's making the calls? I mean, he's been with him pretty much everywhere he goes. So I'm sure he has a pretty good idea of how Fangio would call a game kind of thing. But it still leaves a few questions there just with that change in position and what he can really do to dedicate himself to working with the defense, but yes, they'll have to work with the offense, special teams, everybody out there.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's going to be different than it has been. It's going to be much more complicated than what we've seen the past few years. But I mean, you have Chris Harris Jr. complaining last year about, teams know what is coming. They know our calls. It's so simple. So there's a little bit of, ups and downs, positives and negatives to each of them.
Right.
Like with the Wade Phillips one, a lot of times those defenders aren't thinking too much. And when you're not thinking too much, you play faster.
Right.
But that being said, that means that other teams know what you're doing. And if you have any sort of talent disparity where you can't just out-talent those guys like that 2015 defense did time and time again, then you're going to get pried open. So, I mean, even sometimes that 2015 defense was having some issues because the middle of the field could be a little bit susceptible, as has been the issue in Denver for the defense for quite a few years. I mean, we're really nitpicking. It's still been a pretty good defense over the last, 4 or 5 years, but the middle of the defense has not been great, and it's just been a simple kind of match it up and go at it defense. So, going to be a little bit different with Fangio, and that's going to require a different kind of player.
Right.
You can't really have – not that the Broncos have been employing knuckleheads. That's not what I'm getting at. But you need guys who can process at a high rate and not only do their job – well, they need to only do their job. At Bill Belichick, do your job. But they need to know what everybody else is doing at the same time.
Right. Right. It's a defense. It's kind of like the zone blocking scheme where it's 5 guys working together. It's not just one individual winning a battle or anything like that. You have to have everybody on the same page. And now I will say it does seem like Fangio's system is at least simple enough for people to get it pretty quick, because the Bears, they went from one of the worst defenses to one of the best pretty darn quick. Before he got there, I was looking up the stats. They finished 30th in yards and 31st in points allowed the season before he got there. Now, this last year, given he's added a lot of talent to that defense, they finished 3rd in total yards given up, 7th in pass yards, 1st against the run, 1st in points allowed per game, 1st in takeaways with 36, 1st in passer rating allowed, and 3rd in sacks. So in a matter of 3 years, they go from bottom 3 defense to number 1 defense in football. That's a pretty good turnaround. Again, I mean, that's with adding a lot of talented players. We can't undersell that part of it. I mean, when you add a guy like Khalil Mack, who's a top 3-4 defender in all of football, they added some cornerback talent, safety talent improved. Obviously, the linebacker core with adding Trevathan and
Roquan.
Right, Roquan. I mean, that's some nice guys that I think the Broncos wouldn't mind having right now.
No, and don't like the defensive line talent. It wasn't just last year. I mean, Khalil Mack kind of was the cherry on top, but they already had Eddie Goldman, who is a really good nose tackle type. They have Akeem Hicks, who's a top 5 interior defensive lineman. They have 2 really good lengthy corners, both former first-round picks, I believe, in Prince Amukamara and Kyle Fuller, and then 2 really good safeties. I mean, obviously, Amos left for the Packers, but I mean, Eddie Jackson just absolutely dominated last year. So it's the scheme. We make a lot about the scheme and Vic Fangio and the development by Donatell. That's something that is important as well. Donatell is considered one of the best developers of talent of defensive backs.
Right.
But those Bears teams had a crap ton of talent.
Right. But again, everywhere he goes, things really improve. The 49ers, when they really had that nice run, they were going to Super Bowls, or one Super Bowl, I guess I should say. But I mean, one of the top 3 teams, they had just an incredible defense. Just very, very impressive. Always loved watching what they were doing. 2010, when he was with Stanford, they went from 69th in points allowed the year before in 2009 at Stanford to 10th in points allowed. So that's a pretty good jump there. 98th in yards allowed to 21st in yards given up. I mean, that's, again, some nice jumps that you're seeing with what this guy brings to the table. And so I'm excited for what he's going to bring for the Broncos. I don't think they have all the pieces in place. You're not going to do that in one off season. And they got some aging players, of course. So they're going to have to do a lot of rebuilding of this entire defense over the next few years. But they do have some nice core pieces, obviously, Von Miller, Chris Harris, Bradley Chubb, that they can really build around. And so today, again, we're just going to take a look at what he does with his scheme and look at some of the players the Broncos have, maybe some of the strengths that they bring, some of the weaknesses, and just kind of compare what they could do this year and helping this defense become better than what they were last year. Because like you already said, Chris Harris really complained about the defense, just wasn't creative. It didn't challenge a lot of offenses. It just was kind of our guys are better than your guys kind of defense. I always complained about that back in 2014 when Del Rio was here, that's kind of his mindset was, oh, I got all this talent. I'm just going to let them go out and do their thing. And
he was too conservative too.
He was.
He very much base package, no creativity, no confusion. I don't think it was as simplistic in the coverages as what Phillips brought to the table. But as far as creating pressure and creating turnover plays, granted, we did have what's the word I'm looking for? Injection of more talent with Phillips. So, chicken or egg all the time.
Right. So anyway, starting off, let's just look at the scheme. Fangio runs what you would consider a 4-3 under defense. I mean, every defense you look at in the NFL today really is hybrid defenses. They're not really a completely traditional 4-3 or a traditional 3-4. There's always going to be some mixing and matching on how they do things. But for the most part, if you want to call Fangio's defense something, it really is a 4-3 under defense. And
in base.
Right, in base. Let's get that correct there. But just looking at how they would set up when you're looking at the Bears, It starts with their nose tackle. You already talked about him. Eddie Goldman really had a great season for him this last year. And what Fangio likes in his nose tackle is a guy that brings both athleticism but also the ability to anchor. I mean, this is kind of a unique way that you're not looking at what the Broncos have had for the last couple of years. You're looking at guys that just really eat up blocks and get other guys tackles. They want a guy that can actually shoot the gap. They don't play straight up on the center. A lot of times they are shading towards the strong side of the field. And so I really like this setup for Shelby Harris. I think he could be a real benefactor from, one, becoming a starter. I mean, that's going to help too. But also, two, he is one of those guys that really can shoot the gap, can make plays in the backfield. Last year, Goldman had 3 sacks, 5.5 tackles for loss. I just watched his game against, who was it, the Rams, where he got the safety. Just really shot the gap perfect, right in the face of their quarterback, and boom, big play. And so for Shelby Harris, he's going to have some opportunities to really get into the backfield, make some plays in either the run game or the pass game.
Yeah, my biggest concern, and again, we're just talking prototypes here. You're never going to have a full prototype at every single position, but is Harris going to be able to take on the responsibility in the run game? In base package, he hasn't really been using that before. They've been using him more in the more opportune setups where he can pin his ears back and penetrate and try to disrupt. But if he's going to be the starting nose tackle, there's going to be more run emphasis in his game. And I'm not saying that he can't do it, but I need to see it as far as his ability to hold up, take on blockers when he needs to free up guys behind him, or, create that penetration back there. But still, I mean, he needs to stress those gaps in a way that it does take on blockers, because if he's between two of them, they have to get there and attack him. Otherwise, he's going to create issues. So it's just more so the ability to anchor and take on those guys in the run game with the increase in snaps. That's my biggest concern. But
right.
Again, I'll give that up. I will give up run. A lot of people, basics, especially high school football. Priority one is establish the run, stop the run. Game's changing, folks. I don't actually. That's not what I'm coming from anymore. I mean, if you're going to give up runs, yes, it's going to chance to beat you. But with the air raid becoming more and more possible and pass attempts at an all-time high in the NFL, I will give up a little bit of run game ability if they have that pass rushing ability. So I'm not too worried about Harris, but there are questions there.
There are. I mean, you're looking at the Bears last year with Goldman. He's 320 pounds. Shelby Harris last year was 290 pounds.
Yeah, totally. That's a massive difference.
Yeah, I'm guessing he put on a little weight this offseason. I am interested to see what he comes in at and what kind of body type he's having. Because, one, I don't want to sacrifice his athleticism. Mm-hmm. That is a worry sometimes when you ask those guys to put on some weight. They lose that step. That's what he is so good at. You don't want to take away from what you're good at. And like you said, I would rather get after the quarterback than I would be able to stop the run, because they can stick other guys in there if they absolutely need somebody to stop the run. I mean, they got Zach Kerr. He was pretty darn good against the run last year. Adam Gotsis could even step in there. He's pretty good at two-gapping. So you got some other guys that can take over that kind of role. So, but Shelby Harris there at that nose tackle position, it's going to be one where I think you're going to see him make some more plays in the backfield, and Fangio is going to give him some chances. They like getting that interior pressure. That is something that Fangio really stresses.
Yeah, and again, I was going to say, not to hijack it here from Eddie Goldman type, but the real hoss on that defensive front is Eddie Goldman. Or not Eddie Goldman, excuse me, Akeem Hicks. Akeem Hicks is absolutely just massive. The fact that he can play that 4-5-3 kind of technique at, what is he, 6'5", 330 pounds, is really, really unique, because he can one gap or two gap and cover so much space. And I mean, really a unique player. I can't think of somebody with his size that can move and still rush the passer like he does.
Right. And so then that brings us to the defensive ends here.
Yeah.
And the way that they kind of set up, a lot of times they will have the weak side defensive end will set up almost in that 3-tech position.
Yep.
And then they'll have the strong side one set up in the 5-tech spot. And so obviously you're playing to the strong side, making sure that they don't have numbers on that side. And they are wanting their weak side defensive end, which was Akeem Hicks most of the time, to be able to get after the quarterback. Now, they do like the ability to kind of rotate those guys a little bit or set up where teams won't know which side's going to be the one coming after the quarterback the most. But for the Bears last year, I mean, when you got a talent like Hicks, you use him. And he did some incredible things. And this is the one spot when I'm really looking at this defense, other than the off-ball linebackers, that I'm saying I don't know who can even bring 70% of what he brought to the table.
Yeah. I mean, he is, like I said, he's a really unique player. The fact that he's been on, from Canada, played in Canada, brought it in, played Patriots. What a great signing by them. And it would be an absolute just boon for this team if they could find somebody that could, out of the rough, that can bring something like him, because he is really a unique player. And, a lot of people, like Khalil Mack, obviously, best player on that defense. But after that, I don't think it's close. I think it's Akeem Hicks. And Roquan Smith, special Eddie Jackson, great player, but, what Hicks can do is just, the power, the length, the size. I'd go on for a long time. He's a really good player. Him and obviously, as when we're ranking interior defensive lineman, Aaron Donald's number 1. I'd have Cox too, but then 3, 4, 5, I would have Chris Jones, Akeem Hicks, then DeForest Buckner. But you can make an argument for any of them. So getting that type of guy on the inside and then pairing him with a guy like Khalil Mack outside, and man, that's just magic.
Right. Exactly. And so I do think the Broncos are hoping down the road Draymond Jones can become that kind of guy.
Well, they're the same, though. Like, they're totally different body types.
Well, I understand that. But I'm looking at that first step quickness, the ability to be a pass rushing option, because they want that weak side defensive end to be more your pass rusher. And Draymond Jones, that's his best skill set. And so he has to put on some weight. He has to get NFL strong, all those kind of things. And yes, I don't think he'll ever be at an Akeem Hicks kind of level. But when we're talking about ability to get after the quarterback, that's the only guy for the Broncos that I'm looking at right now of what we've got. I mean, Walker, we don't even know if he's going to make the roster this year. Adam Gotsis has shown some improvement, but he's never quite taken that next leap. Derek Wolf's getting up in age. So the only guy right now on the roster that I see being able to give a little bit of what you see with Akeem Hicks really is Draymond Jones.
I think our best bet in that regard is if Adam Gotsis all of a sudden takes a step forward, because there are flashes there, and he has that power and that size, and I think he does have the get off and the ability to two-gap and still play the defense. But Jones is just so, like, what does Akeem Hicks weigh, like 330?
320.
320?
Or 318, I guess is the
318.
exact number.
I don't know if we'll ever see Draymond Jones above 300.
Oh, I
just don't know if he has the frame.
Right.
Yeah. So,
right.
And again, you have to, good coordinators, you can't just do with a prototype. You have to kind of deal with what you have and then scheme around that and put those guys in positions to succeed. So Broncos don't have an Akeem Hicks, so they're going to have to change how they play defense a little bit up front. They don't have a Roquan Smith, so they're going to have to change how they play defense a little bit there. So it's it'll be interesting to see how they adapt and how this team is different than what the Bears have. Like, I would argue that also the Broncos in the back end are more versatile than what the Bears are. I mean, I would take the Bears back end probably with the size and the prototypes they have on the edge as far as boundary corners. But when you have like Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, Chris Harris Jr., and Bryce Callahan, Will Parks, all these guys are super versatile and more multiple than what I think the Bears had last year.
Right.
So it's going to be different.
That is a huge key to a Vic Fangio defense, which we'll talk about here a little bit more later. But then looking at the other defensive end spot, you have the one that plays the 5-tech, which is really the one you see taking a lot of double teams. This is, think Justin Smith back when the 49ers were so good.
God.
He was so good at taking on blocks, even forcing double teams to open up things for other players. And just made life so much easier. I mean, really, I thought they had lots of talented players back then in the 2011, 2012, era of the 49ers. But Justin Smith was really the unsung hero of that defense. He did the dirty work that didn't show up in the numbers, but man, without him, they would not have been the defense they were.
Yeah, I mean, what a special player. I mean, didn't he go like 3rd overall when he came out? 2nd overall?
I can't remember.
He was a very, very highly touted player from Missouri. He played some edge, but he also played that he moved inside, and just the power and the stoutness that he had. Really a damn good player. Played some really good years at Cincinnati, but then went over and was a integral part of those teams with Fangio and the 49ers. So, man, if maybe AJ Epinesa could be that guy. Rubs my hands. I can't see it. I'm rubbing my hands right now. But no, it'll be interesting. I don't think Justin Smith brought more as a pass rusher than any of the Broncos edges or defensive ends do right now.
Right.
But he was still more of that power stout guy that could change angles, put pressure in the pocket in that way and just be a hoss.
Right. And I do think this will be the Derek Wolfe position.
Yeah.
Because he is really good at helping take on those double teams, does well against the run. And there's been so many times, especially he and Von Miller just work so well at understanding how to set each other up. And so, I mean, I think he'll do pretty good at that spot for the Broncos.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Well, hopefully he'll stay healthy. I mean,
right. I was just about to say that. But no, I mean, so it'll be fun to see how the Broncos mix and match their defensive linemen. And because none of them are quite like what the Bears had last year. So I don't know. It'd just be unique how they have to scheme to better fit what the talent is here in Denver.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting. I mean, the defensive front, it's going to take, just like we're talking about the offense, it's probably going to take a little bit of time to transform this defense as well. And one thing the Broncos do have going for them over that Bears team, obviously we talked about the multiplicity, but it's got to be the 2 dynamic edge rushers. Because I think as good as Mack was, Von Miller's right up there with him, but Bradley Chubb is just, I mean, even after one season, it's crazy obvious how much better he is than Leonard Floyd, who has been a disappointment to this point.
Right. Now, just listening, it does seem like the Broncos coaches think Chubb's a better fit than Miller almost. I mean, I think Miller is one of those guys. He can play every scheme possible, but it just does seem like Chubb is the guy that they're going, this is Khalil Mack. I mean, he's not as talented as Mack. I don't think I'm trying to say that. But I think that's kind of their mindset of, I think they view Mack and what they were able to do with Mack last year to that of Chubb.
Yeah, that power edge is, I think, more what they're going for there. But that being said, Fangio's shown he can do it with the speed rusher as well, because you had Aldon Smith in the 49ers, who, I mean, if you recall at the time, people were saying that Aldon Smith was as good or better than Von Miller. And I mean, if he hadn't gone off the deep end, he might have ended up being there. I mean, he was talk about another Missouri guy there, but because the length and the speed and the bend they had was just really pretty darn special. But I think both of these guys together will just wreak havoc this season. I mean, they wreaked havoc last season. The team still, the offense couldn't get it going, and the back seven was not great. But I think you do see Chubb more in that Mack role, where Miller is more of that Floyd speed rusher role. If you're going to like play on a little closer to the line of scrimmage, more of the strong sided, probably Chubb.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Now, I will warn Bronco fans, because I know people say here and say this every year when they're watching the last couple years. Von Miller will drop into coverage. Bradley Chubb will drop into coverage. They're both not always going to be rushing after the quarterback.
Yeah, that's going to really irritate some people. I'm not ready for the Twitter people just freaking out. Why are they doing that? What idiots?
Well, and this is Vic Fangio had to explain last year when they played the Patriots why Khalil Mack dropped into coverage so many times, because he actually dropped back into coverage more times than he rushed the quarterback. Which I would probably have that same question going, Fangio, come on, man. I know sometimes games situations call for this, but still, you don't have a talent like this and drop him into coverage every time like this. But he actually dropped into coverage 18 times to only rushing the quarterback 16 times.
Yeah, that would be a little. If he ended up losing that game, I'd be a little bit irritated. I won't lie, but again, there's method to it. Like it's about creating confusion. If you know Vaughn is coming every time, then you're going to shift. You're going to bring extra pressure. But if, let's say, pre-snap, you're really gearing up to stop Vaughn, you have a guy over there, you're going to slide the protection that way, And then Vaughn drops into coverage and you're bringing pressure on the other side. Well, that totally screws everything up. So it's more of just keeping teams off balance. Again, Chris Harris complained about it last year, more so than coverage than pressure packages, but it's about keeping it fresh and confusing the other team and making them just unbalanced and making them off key.
Right. And I just want to remind people of that 2015 playoff run when the Broncos played the Patriots. And yes, they got tons of pressure on Brady, but they did a lot of what the Bears tried to do against the Patriots this last season. Now, yes, they lost 38-31, so there is reason for questioning. But you think of Von Miller getting that interception against Brady. That was such a huge play early off in that game where he dropped back into coverage and really surprised Brady, got right into that window. That's what they try to do a lot. They just flooded the windows, those quick 5-yard windows. And that's exactly what the Bears tried to do this last season. Didn't quite work as well as they were hoping, but it just shows that there's some thought process behind this. It's not just, hey, let's take our best player and use him in ways that are not quite his strengths. There's definitely scheming going on and trying to do your best job to get after these guys. But so yes, Von Miller will drop into coverage. I will say though, just looking at Khalil Mack last year, the 5 games before that, he only dropped back into coverage 20 times total. So it really is a game-by-game game plan.
Yep. Just meant to confuse the other team.
Right.
Then it depends on who you're playing. I mean, obviously, against the Patriots, where do they hit the field the most? It's those boxes, those short intermediate boxes, like where a slant would be from a slot receiver. So if you're dropping that edge rusher there, you're taking away that quick pass. And if you do that against Brady, you're going to give yourself a chance. So I don't mind it at all. And not every team has it's kind of, I guess, harder for maybe Broncos fans to understand because not every team has a Chris Harris Jr., right? Like that's a totally different ball game in terms of taking away that slot player. So we'll see, but it'll be interesting.
Right. So then that brings us to the linebackers, the off-ball linebackers, I should say.
Should we take a quick break?
Yeah, let's do that real quick.
All right, we'll be right back, folks.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All righty, and we are back to talk pretty much everyone's favorite position to talk about in this defense over the past season. Well, maybe besides the cornerbacks as well, but we're talking off-ball linebacker and as it pertains to the Vic Fangio defense. And I'll kick it back off to you, Carl, since you did a lot of the legwork for today's shows.
Well, this is where the Broncos really could get in some major trouble.
Yeah. Because
Fangio does really require his off-ball linebackers to do quite a bit in coverage.
Yeah.
He really wants them to be multi-dimensional where they're not just run stuffers, they're not just coverage guys, but they need to be able to do everything. And right now, I'd say the Broncos have 2 good run defenders, but not great in coverage. Neither of them have tons of speed. I do think, we've talked about it on this show a ton of times, Todd Davis is underrated by a lot of people. I think his coverage ability has improved almost every single season. Not saying that he's all of a sudden this elite coverage guy, but he has improved. And then, of course, you got Josie Jewell. Had an okay season last year, but wasn't asked to do a whole lot in coverage, where this year he is definitely going to be asked to do some of that. And so this is where the Broncos, unfortunately, you can't fix every hole every offseason.
Not when you're as bad as the Broncos were.
Right. There's just too much to do. And really this last draft, after the first few guys, there wasn't much left. There were some players you could look at and say, maybe they could really turn into something. But for the most part, there just wasn't the talent that you were looking for. And so it's not worth reaching just to get a guy that probably isn't all that much of an improvement of what you already got.
Yeah, specifically a linebacker, as you're saying. Just
right.
For the listeners.
Right, yeah. And so, yeah, for the Broncos, I do think this could be an issue. I do think, and I was going to ask you about this, do you think the Broncos will run a lot more 3 safety looks when it is obvious passing situations where they put in like a Will Parks into one of those linebacker spots?
I would hope so, but I'm not sure because Fangio hasn't really done that as much in the past, as far as I can tell, as from what I've seen. So we will see. I mean, if you have those guys there and you have 2 slower non-coverage backers, you'd think you'd work out a package to get those guys out there in those obvious passing downs. But we'll see. That's one of the big things I'm curious about going into preseason is just to see how they are lining these guys up.
Right. So, I mean, again, this will be the weakness of the defense, and you're going to see a lot of teams try to take advantage of this. Fangio wants these guys to be able to cover. And for the Broncos, it's been a while since they've been able to have those kind of guys. Unfortunately, our best coverage guy that we've had in a while, Trevathan, went to the Bears.
I wouldn't totally sell short Brandon Marshall in coverage either this past season.
When he was
healthy, he was really good against like running backs and the like. But my God, he was just getting absolutely obliterated in the run game. Yeah. And he lost his step too. But I thought he was doing okay against running backs. Not as good as Trevathan.
Right. I mean, Trevathan was just that all around. I mean, you know how much I love Trevathan.
Yeah.
I thought he was the heart of the defense and really just did a little bit of everything. It seemed like. Loved him. Hated to see him go. Wish he was the one that got paid. But hey, that's where we're at. And so now we're looking at this and saying this will probably be the position that you're looking at to really fix next year.
Maybe. The good thing is Todd Davis's contract, if he doesn't fit the defense or falls off or anything, although he's still not very old, but his contract is very flexible for the team. So if they want to move on, they can. Honestly, it's Todd Davis isn't the one who bothers me, though. It's Josie Jewell.
Right.
Like, I think Josie Jewell is that pretty good for a backup, not great for a starter level of linebacker, where you're just kind of stuck, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And
like, if he was as good in the box and taking on guys, I wouldn't have an issue with it. And he's got a great processor, and can read plays pretty well. I'm actually excited to see him more in his own with his own matchup scheme compared to the heavier main scheme in the past. But like with Todd Davis, he just absolutely can obliterate guys and take on blockers and stuff. But Jewell, if he doesn't beat the guy and read it correctly and get to the hole, he's going to have issues because he does not disengage from blockers very well, to go with not having great speed. So it's a big year for him, because I know he's just a second-year player, but he's going to have to show that he belongs as a starter. Otherwise, I think he would be the one that I would be penciling to replace.
Right. And that's me too. I mean, I don't think you can replace both in one offseason. I mean, the Bears, they obviously signed.
They just got Roquan.
Right. And then drafted Roquan a little bit later. I mean, that's a nice setup for them. For the Broncos, you're probably looking at maybe replacing one and then kind of seeing how those two can work together, see if Todd Davis can continue to grow, all those kind of things. But no, I mean, it's one of those positions. Unfortunately, it just doesn't quite – it's a square peg trying to fit in a round hole right now with what the Broncos have compared to Fangio.
Yep. But we'll see. I mean, they was able to do some stuff with Chris Borland, who isn't the most fleet of foot, and Navarro Bowman was not an elite athlete. So not like the guys like Patrick Willis or obviously Roquan Smith. So we'll see, but it's not on paper ideally what you'd want.
Right.
So we'll see.
Well, now this brings us to our final two positions here on this defense, and really where I think Fangio and this defense really make their money, because they have some of the more unique ways of handling their cornerbacks and safeties. And we'll start here with the cornerbacks. Fangio really loves to mix things up in coverage.
Yeah, he does.
Press, bump and run, man, zone coverage. He just really wants his cornerbacks to be multidimensional, be able to play all over the field, and be one of those groups that they're physical, but they're smart. They know how to drop in zone. They know how to read a quarterback. They know when to break on a ball, all those kind of things. And which that makes me excited with what the Broncos do have, because Chris Harris, one of the smartest cornerbacks, I think, in the NFL. He's one of the hardest working, really understands what a quarterback's trying to do. And I think this is one of those defenses where if he can stay healthy the entire year, I think he could have one of the bigger breakout seasons of his career, at least when you're talking about like turnovers and an ability just to make some big plays in games.
Well, that's honestly that you hit something that I hadn't wanted, or I did want to talk about, I hadn't got to yet. The turnovers are honestly the biggest thing I'm excited about with the Fangio defense, because those teams take the ball away at just a statistically significant difference than other teams. So you get a lot more chances for taking the ball away, and that's honestly what it's becoming about for defense. You know, it is obviously about keeping teams from scoring, but with the higher and higher rates of scoring in the league, taking the ball away is at an all-time high in value because teams are going to get theirs. There's not many 6-0 games. So if you can take the ball away and give your offense a short field, that is more valuable than it's ever been in the league, in my opinion.
Right.
And that's what Fangio's defenses have been really good at recently. And his career, but recently, last year was just insane, the turnover rate.
It was. I mean, they had 5 more turnovers than the next best team in the NFL.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's a significant difference. I mean, imagine getting 5 turnovers in a single game. That's more than one game's worth of turnovers, more than they had than another team, or the second best team. So that's amazing.
Exactly. And so, I mean, for the Broncos, that's something that I do. They actually had more turnovers last year than you would think. They had, I think, 26 last year was the number.
It was high.
28. Yeah, 28. So, I mean, they were actually pretty high in the NFL. But I think this year could be even more for the Broncos. And especially the players that they've added to that secondary, some guys that I think could really be very, very intelligent and make a lot of plays for them. And I do worry a little bit with the cornerback group. Like you said, looking at the Bears last year, you got Prince Amukamara, who's over 6 foot tall, Kyle Fuller, who's 5'11", but pretty long. They obviously had Bryce Callahan, who we got now, but all of our cornerbacks right now look like they're about 5'10", at least the guys that are going to see the most snaps. And so that physicality that he likes, I mean, Chris Harris loves to get physical. I think Bryce Callahan showed last year that he can get physical in the slot, all those kind of things. But it's just they're different. They're not Amukamara, they're not Kyle Fuller in how they play the game.
Yeah, they don't have the same physical dimensions. So that's another thing that they didn't address cornerback really this offseason. They brought in Bosby, but we'll see. So that's a position that I'm very wait and see on because the types there that they have are very different than Amukamara and Fuller. Because you don't see, even with Kareem Jackson, they're just not that body type. So gonna be a little bit different. But maybe a guy like Adam takes a big step. Maybe Bosby turns into a stud finally after years of bouncing around and playing really well in the AAF. So we'll see. But it's I'm very curious to see what type they go after next year, free agency / draft, because that's going to be a little bit more. I feel a little bit more indicative of what they want to do.
Right. So then that brings us to our final position here on the defense, the safeties. And these are the guys, I mean, if you watch the Bears, they had guys flying all over the field. They had them lined up in different positions. They would intermix which one was the strong safety, which one was the free safety. It made things very, very confusing with what they could do with their safety pair. I mean, they really did have one of the best in the league last year. And so for the Broncos this year, I think you already kind of talked about it. The versatility of the guys that they do have of Justin Simmons, he's played that strong safety position. Now he's really getting his chance to be in that free safety spot. So he can play both of them. Kareem Jackson can kind of line up wherever he wants to. You got Will Parks, who's more of really just that. This is kind of the guy that worries me a little bit because he's not as versatile.
Yeah.
But yet he did show last year. I mean, he didn't give up a single touchdown in the passing game. Made some big plays for him in the passing game. I mean, so I don't know. It'll be just interesting how they mix and match those three for the safety position.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I am curious to see. I think Simmons is going to be the big beneficiary, but I am. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, he also got Trey Marshall and Devontae Thomas, so safety is really up in the air. I know that we were going to do, at least I thought we were going to do a little bit of the training camp battle stuff, and Zach and Chad jumped on it, which is fine. But that's the safeties and the depth there and how they utilize these guys is probably as interesting as any question I have going into this offseason for the defense and throwing the cornerbacks too, because it doesn't line up with how the Bears personnel played out. It's a little different, which that's fine. But I don't think taking what we saw from the Bears last year and putting it to the Broncos makes sense with how the Broncos players line up compared to the Bears. So we'll see.
No, I'm with you there. But it is, like I said, this is one of the big things that you really see with Vic Fangio. And we're going to talk about this here in just a little bit of what makes the defense so special. But it is kind of that versatility That's going to be a big word that you're going to see of how players are used, how they're lined up, what they're called to do. I do think, like you said, the Broncos have some players that can do a lot of different things. So that is one nice thing that the Broncos really have going for them when you're looking at this defense and what they bring to the table. And so we'll do that when we get back right after this break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and we are back, and we're going to talk about just now kind of putting the final touches on this picture of what Vic Fangio is bringing to the table when he comes here to Denver, and just really looking at all of his defenses that he's worked with and how he's used different kinds of players. And, I mean, because you really think about it, each defense that he's coached, the strengths and weaknesses have been in different places.
Yeah, no, it's a little different.
It is.
But that's okay. There's different ways to skin a cat, as the horrible saying goes.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But I almost sent you a picture of a cat the other day.
Oh.
I can't remember what it was about, but I just remember thinking, oh, man, I should show this to Nick.
I do like me some cats. I'm a cat and dog guy. I'm not picking either or. Just give me the animals.
I'm a dog guy, but I mean, we have a cat. We do have a cat that my daughter adopted, so I'm with you in the cat ownership building, I guess, now. But no. Anyway, back to Fangio. One of the things that you see with his defense is he always looks for players that are very versatile. He wants his outside linebackers, like we already talked about, to be able to rush passer, but also be able to drop back in coverage. He wants defensive linemen that can hold up to double teams, but also shoot the gap. Off-ball linebackers that can drop into coverage, rush the passer, cornerbacks that can do many different kinds of coverages, safeties that are interchangeable when needed, all those kind of things, because he is so big on disguising what he's doing, making it where deep or offenses have no clue what's coming at them. And it's why you see so many turnovers, because they might have 4 people rushing on a play, but you have no clue which guy's coming. Sometimes they have those off-ball linebackers. They really like – he's always used them at getting after the quarterback. And so I do think you're going to see this year Todd Davis, Josie Jewell getting some opportunities to rush the passer. You're going to have other times where I think Von Miller and Bradley Chubb are going to switch sides and try to figure out which one has the better matchup. You're going to see times where maybe Derek Wolfe shoots the gap and maybe Adam Gotsis is asked to hold on to the double team. I mean, they're just going to do a lot of different mixing and matching, and that hasn't even talked about the coverage side of things. I'm kind of interested to see how they do the slot position, because when you have Chris Harris, Bryce Callahan, 2 of the best slot cornerbacks in the league right now, and, of course, Kareem Jackson, who can play safety, who can play corner, who seems to just kind of be used everywhere, I think this really does set up well for Vic Fangio being able to really make this a unique defense, that each play, each game, teams aren't going to quite know what they're going to be bringing to the table.
I don't think they know exactly what they're going to be bringing to the table each game. But, that's okay. It's going to be a transition season. And a lot of people are pining their hopes for making the playoffs, but I really don't think that's going to be the case this year. Like, as much as that sucks. Tough schedule, tough division, so many moving parts, so many new things. It's going to take time. So like we said with the offense to start the episode, main thing that we are seeing is improvement and progression over time, and that this team has directionality for the first time since Peyton Manning stepped on the field for the first time in the Broncos. You could feel the team heading to somewhere good, and that hasn't been the case since the Peyton Manning retired and walked off into the sunset. So that's going to be the big thing for me with this defense. But they had a choice this offseason to really just go hardcore into the defense and really attack that again with the offense or with the draft. And they instead went heavy on the offense, which also needed help. So it's going to take a little bit of time. That's what happens when you have some bad off seasons and some bad decisions made in terms of the team building, coaching, etc. But it does feel like things are heading in the right direction, but it's really all a lot of hope and projection until we see it, which we will see the first little snippets of it coming very soon with the Hall of Fame game coming up.
Man, August 1st, that's less than a month away for that game.
Oh, man. We're going to have to get our preview hats back on.
Oh, yes. I'm excited about that and just getting back to actually seeing games. Man.
Yeah, I'm excited because that means we only have to come up with one concept a week instead of two, so it's a lot easier as far as the shows go.
Right.
So, all right. Well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dummler MHH and myself and at Kendall MHH. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast account and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.